Hi, Callie and Adria. One of these days, I want to film one of these videos outside, but every time I think it's finally cooling down here, it just gets really hot again. Last week was a bit of a setback for me. My computer hard drive crashed without warning. Not to mention that same day I found a mass of tiny bugs living in my oatmeal, and I didn't eat a full meal for the rest of that day. Still working on getting that computer problem sorted out. I've learned a lot more about computers in the past week than I ever wanted to, but it's really good stuff to know. So I thought this week, instead of just talking about the thing that weighs on my mind all the time, the future, I'd actually do something about it. I said before in one of these videos, probably the last one, that I was considering going back to school to continue studying British Romantics. It's been about a year since I graduated, and my love for them and researching them hasn't diminished in the slightest. If anything, I'm eager to pick up the research again. But the problem with British Romantics is if you try to do a Google search for schools with really good master's programs on them, pretty much all those schools are in England, and they tend to be really intimidating names like Oxford and Cambridge. Just reading about the programs on those schools' websites makes me feel like a silly imposter who has no right to even consider applying. Yet I'm still making myself read about them. A coworker gave me a good piece of advice, though. He suggested that I look up the faculty and see if their research fits what I'm doing or interests me in some way. So here's what I found. At Oxford, there's a guy named Bevis who published a short book on Byron. That's helpful since Manfred is still the work I'm most interested in writing on. He also apparently helps run a reading group founded on this Charles Lamb quote. That sonnet, Coleridge, brings afresh to my mind the time in that nice little smoky room at the Salutation and Cat, which is even now continually presenting itself to my recollection, with all its associated train of pipes, tobacco, egg-hot, whatever that is, Welsh rabbits, metaphysics, and poetry. There's also a woman named Sutherland who's so involved in the works of Jane Austen, it's awesome. For the University of Leeds, it's a lot harder to find faculty at first, specifically interested in the Romantics, but I do like their option for Masters by Research. Basically, if you've already had a good handle on what you want to research, you can skip taking the courses and writing a thesis and just go straight into your own research. However, despite it being on the website and being available for the 2015-2016 school year, it's unclear if it's still available for the 2016-2017 school year. That's a lot of numbers. While pushing through their faculty page, I noticed one major difference between this one and Oxford, which is the school I looked at first. While Oxford has plenty of faculty members researching all sorts of subjects related to the Romantics, I'm talking really fast in this video because it's a lot, I'm so sorry. Not a single one of them seemed to have anything to offer in terms of feminist criticism, which is of course what my paper on Byron was, but Leeds has at least 3 or 4 faculty members interested in gender, 2 of which specifically study gender in the 18th and 19th centuries. One of the lectures focuses on ecological criticism, and I swear that stuff is so difficult. Hansen tried to cover it in 302, and I don't know if a single one of us entirely grasped the concept. That same lecturer, whose name is Davies, also has a book called Bodily Pain in Romantic Literature about physical pain before surgical anesthesia and how it, I quote, draws attention to the body's very capacity to have feelings. And now I really want to read that book. There's a Professor Whale who wrote a book on Keats about gender and sexuality. Durham University, I'm assuming it's pronounced, has a couple of modules on the feminine, but one of them is specifically Victorian, so I'm not entirely sure about that. At Queen Mary University of London, I really want to read Dr. Bari's book, Keats in Philosophy. There's also Professor Taylor, who's written a great deal on Wollstonecraft's feminism. While the University of York has a good deal of romanticism, there's only one faculty member specifically interested in Byron and only one in feminism. So while I might learn a lot there, it's not on topics of immediate interest to me. Birkbeck is another one of those sites that makes it difficult to learn about the faculty, and the Romantic Studies Handbook lists a few too many modules on Victorian literature, but they do offer a module that's an internship at a location that holds romantic materials, so that's pretty cool. At Cambridge, there are a couple of faculty members researching gender, a couple researching Byron, and one, Dr. Wallace, who's interested in both. Also, weirdly enough, there is a Dr. Tomlin, who writes on language in the Pacific Northwest. On the US side, things are a lot more difficult. Very few schools seem to have any real interest in British Romanticism. Fordham University splits their British literature at the 1800 mark, so while I may learn about Byron, it wouldn't necessarily be in the context of the Romantic era as a whole. University of Massachusetts Amherst has a couple of faculty members interested in gender in the 18th and 19th centuries, but nothing on Byron. Boston University has a quarterly publication called Studies in Romanticism, but I couldn't find much beyond that. Brown offers a little, but that school is like twice as expensive as everywhere else I was looking at. I decided to check in on good old UW, and nope, nothing. Mariano is still there, but she isn't teaching a class in the Romantics. That might change in the next academic year, but I don't know. NYU is better, but for a research university, I feel like their MA course doesn't really favor research, or at least value personal research. You can, though, apply for the PhD without having an MA, but I don't know if I'm entirely ready for that. It's something to think on. They have one romanticist focused mainly on Coleridge and another that doesn't seem to list a specific poet on their page. And all of that took hours to research, and there are still so many schools I need to look into. I never imagined I'd look to Leeds with so much hope. And Cambridge is still a good possibility. But I'd also like to stay in the United States because it's a lot cheaper. Possibly a lot cheaper. That's not a guarantee. Like Brown, for example. But after all that, it was really good, and it was kind of exciting to look at some things and a little bit worrying to look at other things, and I have to remind myself that this is a topic that I know pretty well, even if I sometimes will doubt myself really seriously. I mean, sometimes I even realize that I got to go and study in Rome for 2 months, and I even got to sit in a lecture there on Byron, and that's an opportunity that I'll forever be grateful for. But it reminds me how much I really do want to work on this. I think I was a little more excited at the beginning of this search than I am at the end of it, because it's a lot of hard work. But I know that I want to continue this paper on Byron and Manfred. My paper, 7 pages, was just a little too new criticism, and I feel like if I have the time and the resources, I can look at it from much more of a historical and biographical point of view, and that it can go way more in depth and just cover so much more and just be a better paper, because I really want to understand not just how gender is presented in that text, but why, and what that means, if that makes sense. Also, currently reading The Thin Man by somebody, Dashiell Hammett. It's a mystery from 1933 about a married couple that try to solve a murder, and it's hilariously just completely witty. Like, one of the funniest lines that's in the beginning of the book, it's in chapter 8, which is the beginning, it's just 31 pages. They're really short chapters. The main character, Nick, had just woken up, and his wife, Nora, came into the room. There's a guy with a gun that wants to talk to him. It's a little frightening, but the guy isn't really aiming the gun at anything. But Nick is like, all right, talk, but do you mind putting the gun away? My wife doesn't care, but I'm pregnant, and I don't want the child to be born with, and the other guy cut him off. But that was just hilarious, and it's like, it takes place during Prohibition, so like the characters go to speakeasies a lot, and they drink a lot, which is kind of a hilarious look at the Prohibition era. But anyway, I think this has gone on for long enough with a lot of fast talking. Hopefully it isn't too long, hopefully it isn't too fast. But I look forward to seeing your video, Adria, next week. Bye!